Mr. Chapman?
Yes.
Notice that there is a Personnel and Policies Committee as well.
That starts at 5:30 and then the other one's right after that.
Okay, so Finance goes second?
Yeah.
Okay,
Take more than 5 minutes at that.
okay.
Yep.
Perfect.
Tell them about November 3rd, how? And are we muted?
No.
Ian,
Are we muted or not?
No, would you like to be?
yes, please.
Mr. Hoffman, where's your sucker loser uniform there?
I'm not protesting today.
Okay, okay.
He replaced it with hero.
Yeah.
I actually, well, oh no, wait, I better not say that. We might be recording. I'm gonna let it go.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes, sir.
you missed the little red car the other day.
What did I miss?
The little red car.
Why? What little red car?
Mine, I drove it.
Oh, you did? Oh, man. Got it all fixed up again?
Well, so it runs.
Kind of, huh?
Yeah.
That's nice, though. Your season's about running out, though. That's nice. So you got it out. That's it. I'm glad of that. It's been so long, I forgot about it.
It's going to be Thursday, September 17th, 2020. It's at 5:30 at Volcano Room 303. I'd like to call to order the I'd like to call Personnel and Policies Committee to order. I'll take roll call. Jim Webster. Here. Joe Hoffman.
Present.
Angie Goro. Marty Rudd.
Present.
Dave Kelly. See him, I'm assuming he's here. Paul Arena.
Here.
Up here, let the record reflect we have a quorum. Approval, I have a motion to approve the July 6 minutes of 2020. Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Hoffman, seconded by Mr. Webster. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. Do we have anyone for public comment? Seeing none, we'll skip that part of the meeting and we'll go straight to item E, and that's a resolution to declare November 3rd, 2020 a holiday. May I have a motion? Kelly, seconded by by Jim Webster. Okay. And
Dorothy Red.
Dorothy Red. Okay, you know what? Do you want to speak to this real quick, Steve, or Pat?
Yeah, I can. The state of Illinois on June 16th passed a law declaring November 3rd, 2020 state holiday, and is requiring the closure of all government offices. So I've worked with the Human Resources Department and the State's Attorney's Office, and a resolution is in front of you to consider declaring November 3rd, 2020 holiday to comply with the state of Illinois directive. So
That would be another unfunded mandate, I
That-
suppose.
it's unfunded. Yeah, they didn't write us a check to pay for the cost of doing this.
Thank you, whoever.
Yeah.
Any comments reference this resolution?
I do.
Mr. Webster?
Yes. I guess I got a question here. Is this something there that we are bound to do? Do we have to do this?
I'll let the state's attorney's office weigh in, but yes, in my opinion, there's not a lot of choice for Winnebago County in terms of complying with the state law. They are requiring all government offices to close. And I was on a conference call on a lot of other issues with county administrators throughout the state of Illinois, and I polled all of them. And there was unanimous, all the counties that were on that call have done the same thing, have declared a holiday for the election day to comply with state law. Now, I'll let the attorneys weigh in, but I guess one option would be to say we're not going to pay our employees, and it would be a an unpaid furlough or whatever. But I would not recommend doing that. I think we would set ourselves up for a lot of legal issues with our workforce. So Dave or Marilyn, if you want to weigh in, but that may be an option, but I would not recommend doing it.
I can weigh in if Mr. Chairman, if you want me to answer.
Certainly.
Question. So certainly this is a mandate from the state. It stemmed from originally President Trump declaring this a holiday by executive order. Because of the timing, obviously, you have not had a chance to plan to determine whether or not you are going to be exchanging this holiday in the future for another holiday that you currently provide the employees off. But this is the proper way to handle it, in my opinion, so that you don't run afoul of the state mandate and you don't incur county employee lack of morale by saying, okay, it's a holiday, but we're not going to pay you at this juncture for it. So I believe that's something that you have to do. Obviously, going forward, you can plan in the following year, but at the timing of the mandate coming down, you are left with very few options, in my opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Webster, follow up.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I understand, I asked the question anyways. I understand that hands are tied on things like this. It's just exasperating that it's another unfunded mandate. I wonder how much collectively will that cost us to give everyone a day off, a paid day off?
Approximately $190,000.
$190,000. And so when we say that we have to do this because the state said that we have to do this, that's probably more correct than having to do it just because the president said to do this. And I say that to you because the state has paid for election day as a day off, as a paid holiday for many, many, many years. And I know this for a fact because I did work for the state for nearly 20 years. And we got that day off. And I thought it was ridiculous even back then that it's a civic duty to go and vote. And you work an 8-hour day or even a 12-hour day, you would still vote before or after.
Right.
In this day and age now, with the promoting this mail-in voting and early voting and all that, to give people paid day off to vote, I think it's ludicrous. And that's all I have to say on that. Thank you.
I'm going to weigh in. I didn't realize it would be that much money. That's pretty good hit. I'm gonna weigh in right now and just give some thoughts too, because Madam State's Attorney brought this up, but I'm wondering, we have another resolution establishing court holidays. Now, would that, if we were to interchange them, would we be violating union problems there?
I think we would be in trouble. I would defer to Mr. Curlicus or Ms. Marilyn Ross for that.
Marilyn?
Got a question? Yes, I think since you've already have those contracts in place, that you would certainly be running afoul if you try to take away a previously negotiated holiday in exchange for the election day holiday. And I can tell you that I am aware of at least one county that has traditionally offered and closed courthouses on election day, and that has been Cook County. During my tenure in working in that county, they closed all the courthouses, and of course, state's attorneys as essential employees continue to work on election day, but just sharing that with you. So it's not uncommon in different jurisdictions, but now that it's coming from the governor's office, you really don't have a choice in that matter.
Definitely, thank you, Marilyn. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd encourage county employees to volunteer for the county clerk's office to help with the election, as I think we're going to be short of election judges on account of the virus crisis. I know I've been an election judge for years, my wife also, and this year we're declining to do it. I mean, I'm 70, going on 71.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. I could, that's probably something I probably should look at, but I'm not getting any younger neither. So with that being said, I guess we kind of are proverbially over a barrel or under a barrel or in the barrel on this situation. Do I have any more comments from the committee reference this? Hearing none, you can either signify by raising your hand or saying aye. All in favor, aye, or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
The resolution, Mr. Webster is a no. Resolution passes and go for the board. Next item is a resolution establishing a county holiday schedule for 2021. May I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Hoffman, seconded by Mr. Webster. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. Is there any questions reference the resolution establishing county holiday schedule for 2020? 2021, yeah, sorry. Paul?
I have a question.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So does this have to happen now, or can we look at this to exchange one of those holidays for the one we just granted?
No, unfortunately not because of the.
This is for
Go ahead.
next year.
Doug, I'll refer that over to Human Resources.
I believe Ms. Hyde Ross answered that question a few minutes ago regarding the contract that we currently have in place with the bargaining units.
Every single one of them?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Arena, she, the state's attorney did pique my interest on that too, but I think we're proverbially over the barrel on this one again. But it's
What's the point? What's the point of doing this if there's no discretion on whether we can approve it or not? I don't even understand what we're doing.
I defer that to maybe the state's attorney or maybe Mr. Kalinkas or Maryland.
If I could, the number of holidays are what are bargained in the contract. The county board can set the dates on those if you know, the day before Thanksgiving or however Christmas falls on a given day. But the number of holidays are bargained for in the contract. And just to let you know, I mean, you can't swap a holiday in the 2020 calendar year for a holiday in the 2021 calendar year. That just doesn't work.
Right.
Oh, I see.
Do I have any further questions on this? I guess, when is is this gonna be every 4 years?
No,
This is,
no, this is just for this year. Are you talking about the election
Yes.
day? Yeah, 2020.
and then we're back to like for the primaries and, you know, when that comes
No.
up,
No,
just every 4 years,
This is a
it's
one
just
time.
this one time
just a one time.
One time, 2020, November 3rd.
as of now.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, as of now, the executive order from the governor's office is for the general election year 2020. We don't know if that's going to, if there's going to be another order or if there's going to be future legislation declaring every general election a state holiday. But right now, we're just dealing with the general election for 2020.
Okay, well, I'll give you my birthday too. We could probably make that a state holiday. I'm sure Chapman's got a birthday. We could probably give our workers off. So I'm frustrated as the rest of you on that. I didn't realize it would be that much money. Motion in front of us is the 2021 holiday schedule. It's been bargained in. Do I have any further questions? I think we've already moved it in. I think have we moved that in, Steve? I thought we got it on the floor.
I think you did.
I think we have it on the floor. So with that, all in favor of the 2020 holiday schedule, signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye. That motion passes. Any other matters that come before this committee? Yes, Mr. McDonald, is that it?
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm not on your committee, sir, but thank you for giving me this time. I've been contacted this afternoon by 2 business owners. Something about the health department is becoming more stringent than state requirements. Honestly, I don't know too much about it. I'm just asking as the personnel and policy chairman, if maybe you guys can check into this and see what it is Dr. Martell is trying to do.
You said more stringent. What would that be as far as not allowing businesses to be open, or is it the food industry?
I don't want to say on the record because to me, so far it's hearsay because I've been contacted by 2 business owners. So I would rather get the facts from Dr. Martell or the health department to find out what's going on. But from what they're hearing, the intention is to become more stringent than the state.
We'll look into that, and I'll try and have a report for you either at the caucus or at the board meeting. Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you.
With that being said, any other matters to come before this committee? I may have a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Hoffman, seconded by Mr. Kelly. All in favor, signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye. Personnel policies is adjourned. Thank you so much. Turn it over to Mr. Salgado. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fiducia. Guess we'll get started here. I'll only pull up the agenda for my record. So I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee. It is 5:44, Thursday, September 17th. I'll take roll call. Myself, present. Mr. Hoffman,
Present.
Mr. Girl,
Present.
Mr. McDonald.
Here.
Mr. Butita said he was not feeling well today and he was not going to be in attendance. Mr. Fiducia,
I am here.
Mr. Schultz.
Here.
All right, let the record reflect, we do have a quorum. Our next item, Mr. Chapman, is there anyone signed up for public comment, or Mr. Thompson?
No.
All right, thank you. We'll skip that and go on to our next item, which is a budget amendment 2020-023 Veterans Assistant. Can I get a motion and a second? Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Girl second. Thank you very much. Discussion, Mr. Chapman or Mr. Thompson, if you want to speak to it, please. Thank you.
I can speak to this. The Veterans Assistance Commission, they make the payments to the veterans for the assistance that is given out through their agency. The original budget that we had budgeted this year was $246,000 for assistance. Actually, back in June, we moved $36,000 from their administrative contract over to this line item for assistance. And we're requesting another $43,000 to get us through September, which would bring us up to $325,000. They've seen a significant increase in their caseload, about 60% over the last 6 months since March, and they're not necessarily changing the amount that's given out. It's just an increase in the numbers. And this would take care of that through the end of this fiscal year. The money would come out of the fund balance. And actually, I think when I figured out the fund balances, I think I looked and I saw that we're going to need additional money anyway. So this just kind of reflects that change that we need.
Yes, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Myself as a veteran as well, I'm very sympathetic to veterans that require assistance and that need help. If I remember properly, was it last year or the year before? I'm sure some of my fellow committee members can help me. I think the sticking point was how much the money was actually going to operational costs and not really going to helping the veterans. Is there, Mr. Thompson or Chapman, is there a breakdown as far as this additional monies, how much of that is going to go to overhead and not directly to helping the veterans?
The entire amount goes to the veterans, the 43,000 we're asking for, and that's an additional to, they voluntarily reduce their administrative costs, as I mentioned, by 36,000, and directed that towards the assistance also. So it's entirely for assistance.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you say fund balance, it's not clear to me whether you're talking about a veteran fund balance or whether you're talking about the general fund balance. If there is another fund, a veterans fund, could you tell me what the remaining balance on that account is?
It is veterans assistance. It's a separate fund that we account for their expenditures and their revenues. I believe we had projected at the end of 2020 fund balance 128,000 in that fund.
All right. Any other questions regarding this? All right. Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Raise your hand. Opposed? All right. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next item, 2021 budget discussion and recommendations. And so we'll, I'll take charge here a little bit. So essentially one of the questions that I have for Mr. Chapman, Mr. Thompson is, have we heard any feedback from departments based on what was, the 2.2% reductions as a proposal, and that certain departments have gotten this information, if there has been any feedback or anything of that nature?
I'll start and then Steve can chime in. I did have discussions with not all of the department heads, but several, and generally speaking, I think they understand that what we were faced with originally was a 6.2 and some change $1 million gap between the requested budgets and projected revenues. And so through the course of some revenue increases and expenditure decreases, we've been able to narrow that fund gap to approximately 1.2 million. And the remaining, gap could be eliminated, and the result being a balanced budget with approximately 2% reduction by all general fund and the 1% funds. And the department heads understand that. And I just had a conversation with one of the larger departments at 4 o'clock this afternoon, and their pledge was that they will try to achieve this. If we're looking at attrition as one possible way of achieving a 2% savings in a budget, some departments will be able to achieve that attrition rate, that 2%. Some are not going to be able to, but collectively, as the county, looking at all the departments, I feel fairly comfortable that we will be able to achieve a 2% savings, either through salary savings and attrition or through other areas within the budget. So I guess to answer your question is it's not going to be an easy task, but I think for the most part, department heads are committed to try to achieve that reduction.
Okay, thank you. So with that being said, I just want to kind of lay the foundation of what currently is in place or before us from last Tuesday. As we alluded to, closing the gap, there's 13 items out there that Mr. Chapman, and I believe he resubmitted again via email to everybody. And one of the things was having the PTAL, which is 900,000, using the host fees as $1 million. It's $1.9 million right there, right off the bat. And then other items that, obviously from the highway department, items like that kind of incurred. And then obviously taking into account the 2.2% reduction to essentially have like a balanced budget. I understand that from my perspective and some other individuals, it's not a balanced budget because we're using host fee money and using spicing up our revenues on that perspective. But overall, from what I've heard, having discussions, everybody kind of have gotten their budget request in there somehow, obviously taking into account the 2.2% reduction. Obviously, they're going to have to go back and work within those means. So I'm just laying the foundation as that piece of it. I'll get to you, Mr. Hoffman, in a minute. So I just want to put this perspective where we're at right now, because before we take any further action, because of those 13 items that Mr. Chapman put together with Mr. Thompson, we'll have to, vote on those recommendations. So then come Tuesday night, Mr. Chapman and Mr. Thompson have direction, essentially what's going to be proposed to on that special meeting with the county, combined county as a whole on that Tuesday night. So at least there is some information that's going to be presented to everybody on the county board. So this is why we're going in that direction. So I just want to lay the foundation. We can discuss about it, but I want to get that information. And then once we go to Mr. Hoffman, I'd like them to kind of talk a little bit about the River Bluff. They put that in the packet as well. So if they could walk us through that, but I'm going to go to Mr. Hoffman and then we'll continue to have those discussions. Go ahead, Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy that we got the work done to close this gap, but my biggest concern is we all know this is not sustainable. We can't do this year after year. I hope we have a plan to prevent this from happening again next budget. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. And that is one of the topics of discussions. And so one of the big ticket items that Mr. Butita and some others, Mr. Schultz, have been questioning on, is River Bluff. So I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Chapman, Mr. Thompson, to kind of walk us through the River Bluff, since it's one of the topics of discussions that we kind of wanted to see from a cash flow perspective, what that kind of implicates, where they're going to end up at the end of the year for 2021. So Mr. Chapman, Mr. Thompson, if you don't mind going through that. And I believe it is page, I think it's
the last page
Okay.
in the packet that was sent today. What we incorporated is the fund equity forecast, and I'll just preface the comments that the projected numbers for 2020 could change as far as the revenue side. There's certain revenues that related to the COVID that we haven't necessarily included in the revenue side until we get an exact definition as to what dollars can be received. The nursing home received about $1 million in what they call stimulus monies back in, I think, June or so. It can be used for COVID type expenditures. At this point in time, we haven't recognized any of that. The other issue is, I believe Pat mentioned that we had to make some changes in the business office here back in, I think it was March or April. And we have a new individual that's in charge of trying to get that area back on track as far as collections go and so on. The expenditures, a good portion of that supplies and services is for in the 2020 budget is again related to the COVID expenditures, but it's also related to the need for hiring outside temporary help to supplant the employees that we've had. We've had a number of individuals that have left the nursing home, primarily in the CNA classification. A lot of them choose not to want to work in that area anymore because of the COVID, or we've had issues where people have gotten sick or their relatives have gotten sick, so they've had to quarantine for the days based on the regs. So you have to hire new people or other people in to take those shifts and so on. So we did have, we've had a couple of meetings here in the last week or so with a consultant from Generations, and both Pat and myself, the other Pat from River Bluff, Molly Terranoni, and so on, to try and look at some different ideas as far as trying to ramp up the revenues again. We're starting to do admissions. We haven't been able, because of the COVID, to bring new residents in, and our census has dropped from, I think, like 190 down to 130. So, so I guess it's going to be a challenge to try and get these numbers reversed. And I don't know, Pat, if you want to chime in any.
Well, based on, just coming into this, the way I'm understanding it is that we may have not had the right staff in place in the finance office in the nursing home, and they weren't keeping up with the billing and the collections. I think based on a couple of meetings I've had with Steve and the nursing home staff, I think they have a good finance team in place now. They are getting caught up on collections and billing, and they are accepting new patients, new admissions into the nursing home. And I have a meeting tomorrow with one of the attorneys in the state's attorney's office to talk about the consent decree regarding our inability to accept admissions from out of state. And according to the nursing home administrator, she feels with the potential admissions pool, she would be able to increase that admissions pool by approximately 25% if we are allowed to admit residents, say from, our border states, namely Wisconsin. And so I don't know that much about that decree, but I'm going to be briefed on it tomorrow. And I think if we can maybe strategize on how to work within that, I think that would really help our admissions and the census.
Thank you. Mr. Schultz, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for doing this work. I appreciate it. You have the footnote with the 3 asterisks on the bottom that says this is not the actual cash available. It does, because a substantial portion of the assets, which the auditors again pointed out, is in property, plant, and equipment.
Yep.
This fund balance takes that into account. It also takes into account the account receivable balance that we're still saying, hey, this is an asset because we're going to be able to collect that. So, Steve, I'm wondering, as it relates to both the projected 2020 balance, maybe you haven't looked at this for the projected 2021 balance, but how much is the actual cash position? I'm assuming it's a negative of a large amount, but
I think Molly indicated to me it was a negative 8 million at this point in time.
And what does then, how does that affect the general fund? The auditors were saying that, it sounded like the auditors were saying that $8 million in this case, I think it was $3 million as of the end of fiscal year 2019. So that's
right,
obviously reflecting the current year deficit. But
yeah,
how does that impact the availability of our general fund dollars? Does that $8 million somehow have to limit the amount that we spend of the general fund, or how does that work?
well, it really limits the cash available in the general fund. I think as mentioned by the auditors when they went through the audit, and that I think at that time was 3.5 million, if I'm not mistaken. So that does limit the cash that's available from the general fund by that amount, because in essence we've advanced that to the nursing home.
So the money's really not there. It's already been spent. That 8 million's already been spent, and it's came out of the general fund cash balance.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Any questions regarding the River Bluff financial piece of it? Yes, Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is going to be rocket science for any of us on this call. These are stunning dollar amounts, right? And so, Mr. Thompson, I'm sure, you're well on your way in terms of a strategy and a plan as to how to look at this. But this is one of those areas where the cash flow projections is a critical item. And how much of that accounts receivable balance is actually collectible, that has come up before, identifying that, and then having a way forward. If the projected cash flows under a reasonable scenario are that, this ship can turn around, then, I think we need to pursue that and understand that and get that report back to the board But as I'm looking at these annual fund balances year after year, it's not COVID that has created this crisis all by itself. We've been in decline in terms of this balance on an annual basis, at least based on what I'm looking at here. And we need to face the music on that and figure out a strategy for how to deal with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Mr. Schultz. Any other comments, questions regarding the River Bluff piece? All right. Seeing none, I think there's one other piece of that. There was the mental health board budget there, Mr. Chapman. That was part of the packet. So if you want to, yeah, go.
Mr. Fiducia has a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Fiducia. I'm sorry. I can't see that far.
I guess River Bluff does fall under personnel and policies previous purvey. And I have some questions, and I don't know if it's if this is the appropriate time to ask them, but it did spark my interest because Mr. Schultz and you guys have made some good comments, but governing forward here, we've got to do something with us. And I guess my questions, and I may just try and call a committee meeting of personnel and policies to determine what we can do in the future, because we brought up out-of-state beds coming in the River Bluff. I don't know if River Bluff would even break even, I would be happy. But this is what I foresee. What I foresee for that property out there is there are companies out there that do this, and there's money to be made. And I don't know if we should, if there's a ways we could increase the revenue, raise the prices per bed, but there's got to be other things out there too, because we're going to have to do something to create revenue for River Bluff. And these are all questions maybe I should just have a committee meeting and ask. So I'll just, or we should maybe have a joint committee meeting, Mr. Salgado, and ask these questions.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Fiducia and Mr. Schultz, your comments and everything. Talked to Mr. Chapman quite a few times. I haven't talked to Mr. Thompson one-on-one or anything like that, but I can tell you that's one of the key issue here is that, we need to start from the beginning, of this each fiscal cycle, every year, start at the beginning, start planning, start projecting where we're going to end up. We started a decent amount at the beginning. Then we lagged, and then obviously the whole thing, I'm not blaming COVID because we could still work behind the scenes, but it just complicated things going forward because we weren't knowing where we were going to end up at the end of the year for 2020. What was the revenue reduction, and kind of figuring out where we're going to end up at the end of the year so we can start setting up the budget for next year. But obviously, one of the biggest things, we talk about all the time is efficiency, where we can, improve on that. So I do encourage ourselves, after this budget cycle is to set up a meeting of some sort between finance and personnel policies to determine, what are the issues, what can we address, and how we can help out Mr. Thompson and Mr. Chapman, and obviously the individuals that are in charge at the nursing home to address some of these issues. The biggest thing is expenditure. I mean, those $2 million swings are just, crazy from my standpoint to see from one year to another. So, and then the other piece of it, as we've always alluded to, is the receivables. How can we do it? Can we sell the receivables to a company that's willing to take the risk? We get it at 60 cents to $1, whatever the case may be, but it's off our books, whatever the case may be. Those are options that are out there, but those are the things that we need to sit down and talk about. And, and I do encourage that, Mr. Fiducia. I do think we need to write off once we get done with this, budget cycle, put it on the radar. There's obviously some internal things that we need to figure out, like a CFO, HR, there's a lot of issues at hand that we can work together and try to get those things. So yes, it's in the forefront for us to continue to push on those things. Any other questions regarding River Bluff, so we can move on to the mental health board budget that Mr. Chapman attached to the handouts that were submitted. Mr. Chapman, do you want to, or Mr. Thompson, you want to talk to that? I believe it's right prior to, well, I don't know what page it is, but
I'm sorry, it's not numbered, but it's actually, there's two amendments, 2021-016 and 017. Let me address the 16 item first, 2021-16. Attached to that particular budget amendment is the information that I received for the original budget that was submitted by the mental health board to, I think it was the health department, and I got a copy of it also. But it, in terms of the items outside of what we would consider the services and that, they're pretty much listed. The legal cost. I believe they're going to be contracting with R1 again for their administrative services. There's software services, which is the I believe they're I believe that might be for their website and etc. Some travel in there, advertising. Don't know quite what that is. The liability insurance, I believe that's for the board itself, because they don't come under the county coverage. It's more like director's insurance, dues and memberships, and then the support charges from the county. The biggest issue I had with what was submitted, and I've had some conversations with their board members and so on, is relating to the professional services. I guess from the standpoint that they basically put a number in there that I guess kind of made up the 13 million, which I'm projecting that they're going to receive in revenue this coming year. Their first check will be received in October of this year, and then proceeding from there. That's for the July receipts and that. But I guess my concern was, given that they probably will not be, they're going through a RFP process and so on for proposals. They're also doing their strategic plan and that. And really, I think they are on track to, spend the dollars in the correct manner for the community. I think they've done some surveys, et cetera. My issue was, given that you're probably not going to start spending money until April or May of this year, we're not going to spend $12 million in our fiscal year. So my concern was that, I guess I like to make budgets somewhat realistic in terms of what dollars are going to be spent. So I did reduce that amount down to 8 million. And again, that's probably too high, but again, it's just a budget number that I included in there, as opposed to the 12 million that they had included in their budget. I did have a conversation, like I said, with them this afternoon. I think they understood what I was trying to do, but I don't know if they did or not. But that's the amendment that I made to the budget that they had submitted. The other items we just kept with what they had included. Amendment number 17. This is an item that
Chapman, it looks like Mr. Schultz has a question before we continue. Go ahead, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to speak to this, the one that you just dealt with, the 2021-016. The contracted staff is a concern to me, and I guess I'm directing this to Mr. Thompson. I'm just thinking that it may be better as it relates to economies of scale for us to look at utilizing county employees. And even if, for example, as we look at the workload relative to the staff, we would need to do a temporary hire. It's a 5-year tax, if my recollection serves me. And even if we needed to do a hire in the county to add staff to assist with the work that would be done on behalf of the mental health board, that could potentially be a savings in comparison to R1, which is a separate entity altogether. And that just, it doesn't make sense to me that we would go in that direction. And you've heard me say before, I do think that we are arbitrarily just throwing everything at R1. Like, they're now a jack of all trades, and we have administrative function capability. And so I'm just thinking it could be a better stewardship of the resources if we went that route. And I don't know if they're open to that conversation, but Mr. Thompson, I would at least suggest that conversation.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Kelly, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. County employees always have legacy costs.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. It's a hot topic. I know I talked to Mr. Chapman a little bit about the mental health board. You know, we kind of addressed the 12 million. There was just no way that I could foresee it for 2021. I know they're ramping up. Could it be realistic that they come out and spend all that money? I don't know. I'm not in that service field or what they're trying to do, their strategy. So, you know, Mr. Chapman took the initiative with Mr. Thompson a little bit to talk to Mr. Neighbors, who sits on the board, as well as part of representing the county, to address some of these concerns that we have. And ultimately, though, just you're right, Mr. Schultz, in the sense that, you know, it's kind of arbitrary, since, you know, the money comes to the county and then it flows down to them. And, you know, but I do agree with you that, you know, they're serving the county as a whole, and we represent the county as constituents out there, from a taxpayer perspective. So I do think, Mr. Thompson, we encourage you to take the initiative, have those conversations with them, and elude some of the concerns with Mr. Neighbors as well. Through him, funnel that information down, because it is, you know, like I said, there are departments out there that could potentially benefit from this partnership. I can think about, you know, the jail system, you know, with mental health, you know, working that end as well, and some sort of areas which benefits the whole county as a whole. So those are discussions that I think we need to encourage Mr. Neighbors and reach out to the mental health board with Mr. Schultz alluded to the contract staff. It's $163,000. That's pretty significantly a concern. There are questions, you know, on that aspect, but you know, and like I addressed last time, we don't even know what their goals, objectives, what they're trying to do, what their structure is. So once, I believe I posed this to Reverend Copeland last time when he came before us, when we gave him that loan. You know, I think some people have concerns of how the money is being spent and for what purposes, but I've encouraged them to, you know, strategize, put an objective, what they're trying to do and how they're going to use the funds, not only just for the county board's sake, but for the entire community as a whole, to see what they're actually tackling. I know they talked about the school district, you know, providing mental health services for students and et cetera. So I think, you know, on that aspect, Mr. Thompson, hopefully we can work with Mr. Neighbors and reach out to the mental health board. I'm not here to tell them how they should run their business or how they should, you know, operate. But from my perspective, also as having constituents in the Winnebago County, address some of these concerns that we have and potential areas that they could target, just like the school district, just like I'm hoping, you know, they could work with the jail, the juvenile detention, maybe the court system, you know, to address some of these mental health issues. Opioid addiction that we have out there is another one, you know, that could relate to that. So those are areas that obviously I'm sure they've thought about, but something that we need to, you know, reach out to them and work together as a, you know, as a partner on this. So any questions, before we move on to Mr. Chapman to continue on? Paul, go ahead, Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to agree with Mr. Schultz's comments and concerns regarding the administrative costs. And I want to remind everyone, it's my recollection that when this tax was brought before the committee, the members, the people who were advocating it at that time, were specific that they were not going to establish a whole nother level of administration, that this money was just going to funnel to them and go through them and go to other organizations that are already established. Now, I understand that may not have been realistic, but I think we need to keep a close eye on what happens moving forward here, who's being involved, who's influencing how the money's being spent. And I did have a conversation with Mr. Neighbors today and expressed that opinion to him. And, you know, he seemed to be in agreement. And I think he's, you know, he keeps a close eye on things in general. So I trust his judgment, but I think all of us need to be aware of that. And if, you know, if there's a way for us to do some of this internally, I support Mr. Schultz's suggestion in that regard. Thank you.
All right, any other questions before we move on with Mr. Chapman? All right, seeing none. Mr. Chapman, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other item, I think that yourself and myself had talked regarding, you know, if we were going to set aside some funds that would relate to any county initiatives that would be proposed through the mental health board, that type of thing. Again, I think what they're looking at is kind of a broad stroke, and I think they've included criminal justice and that type of thing in their overall plan. But I think your concern was to make sure that, you know, our needs are addressed. I don't think we're talking about supplanting programs that we currently have, you know, trying to let's say fund our deficits, that type of thing. But we're trying to look at, make sure that that our if there are some programs that would need to be funded, that they would be looked at by the mental health board in the same fashion as they're looking at the other program. So I think that's my assessment, but maybe if you want to expand upon that. Or...
Yeah, so if you look at, and we're talking about 2020-017, looks like it's about $800,000 of other professional services, county initiated mental health. And this kind of alludes to what I was kind of saying, is that we have departments within the whole county that represents the whole county that potentially, you know, it's not us taking the money and allocating to departments and that sort, but ultimately working with the mental health board to provide services through them, or outsource those services out to those various potential county initiative mental health issues out there. So from that perspective, and so, you know, this is what this is for, because I know that we've had in the past the 1% public safety tax, where we had programs out there that were to target some of these concerns that we have, whether it's mental health and illness, or, you know, whether it's the recidivism of criminals going back into their system, trying to get those programs out there going. So similar situation in this perspective. So, you know, something that we proposed, I believe we had a discussion with their board on this. And so this is just as part of it, setting aside. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen, not going to happen, but it's something that we can, push on ourselves to get us there. So, Mr. Kelly, I see you have your hand up for a little bit, so go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. A lot of what we do at the RIC Center, the Resource Intervention Center, is related to mental health and probably ought to be able to tap in to the new tax.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Kelly. And that, I'm just, from our perspective, because we do represent the whole county, not just an organization and institution, but the county as a whole and citizens out there. This is, essentially what we're trying to do is set up some money aside within that budget so they can, work on those initiatives to work with throughout the county as a whole within our governmental entity on this aspect of it. So this is why this was brought up. Not saying that it's going to happen in this fiscal cycle or it has to happen, but it's something that we can lay to aside and come back to it. And once they have their strategic plan, what they're thinking of doing, how they're going to do things, then we can start partnering on that situation. But once again, we have to have that dialogue with Mr. Neighbors and the mental health board, so we're all on the same page. So, so that's why this was brought up. Mr. Chapman, anything else?
No.
Okay. So I just Mr. Chapman did some homework on the River Bluff with Mr. Thompson. Same thing with the mental health board budget on this perspective. Is there anything else new that was not presented on Tuesday, Mr. Chapman, Mr. Thompson, before we continue our discussion on the recommendations and the budget?
I think the only thing that I'm aware of, Mr. Salgado, I did send something out to the committee when you asked about the funds calculation. If in fact we went ahead with the reductions that we talked about and so on, where that would end up. Again, this doesn't take into consideration River Bluff, but it does look at both the general fund and the 1%. And I think that calculation, once we did it, it was about 25% based on the number that we have. So.
And that includes the deficit, right, of 1.3?
Yes.
Okay. Which would be the reduction additional. So it would put us about 25 point something percent, just slightly above or at that level of our policy. I asked that question because I just wanted to know if, from a county board standpoint, when we're sitting there, and trying to make a decision whether it's whatever the case may be. So just wanted to present. So I appreciate that information. Gives at least some direction as well on that. So for individuals that are hesitant to jump on the ship and go with the PTEL or go with anything else in regards to that. So just wanted to throw that out there. Is that pretty much it, Mr. Chapman, on that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So for now, I want to have discussion, with everybody. And I'll start it. I kind of already said a little bit at the beginning. I see this budget going this way. Obviously taking the CPI $900,000 using host fees of $1 million as supplement to that, but also taking the 2.2% reduction. So essentially it would, and practical reasons would say we're at a balanced budget, right? We're not drawing to our reserves anymore that we could have. So that's why I kind of asked Mr. Chapman, Mr. Thompson to kind of send out information, talk to departments, see what concerns, issues might arise. Obviously, I've gotten comments, it's going to be tight, really tight for us. We'll try to work on it and see what we can do. But I think from this perspective, I think this is a good budget the way it is. Unless anyone has any suggestions, this is a topic of discussion. I just wanted to lay the foundation for this so we can start having these tough conversations and see what we do. One other thing is, I know Mr. Schultz asked about, the sheriff, the $2 million, which is incorporated in there. So essentially, everybody from a perspective, whatever the request was, it's all included in there. So because I've known not to pick on Mr. McDonald, because I respect him and everything. From my perspective, we are not, cutting anybody's budget per se. With the 2.2%, absolutely, there will be some reductions on that will have to be made. But to say that public safety is being cut, within whatever the request, and I think Tammy's in the room so she can allude to that. But, from my perspective, Mr. Chapman and Mr. Thompson tried diligently trying to come up with the numbers and make them work with our departments to see what we can do to get a fair balanced budget. And Mr. Thompson kind of alluded to that, he'd like to, push, encourages us, but to also think future wise on that. So just wanted to lay that foundation. We can talk about it. Comments, questions, concerns, the floor is open to everybody. So I'd like to hear and we can move forward. Not everybody at once. Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, I appreciated seeing the budget amendment in the kind of a general sense as far as the $1.3 million. If I understand it correctly, that was just, a general category without allocation to specific budgets. The conversation that you had toward the beginning of this meeting where you said, Mr. Thompson said that we know that some of the areas are not going to be able to handle the reductions that are in the just purely 2.2% for all of those individual budgets. The fact that we know that going into this, I just would strongly encourage that we not reduce the budgets where we know that attrition won't solve the problem or some other unusual thing that we think in the big picture is going to solve the problem, because that ends up becoming an issue for us where we have historically had those departments come to us and say, well, we told you we couldn't do this from day one. And then the budget amendment comes to fix it. And yeah, but we told you. And historically, the county board just passes that because, well, yeah, it makes sense. They couldn't have done it in the first place. And then another related comment is just for Mr. Thompson's benefit more than anything, and I'm sure you've seen this with other counties that you've worked with, this deal about attrition has also been a source of future budget amendments. And the storyline is this: they come with the budget amendment later in the fiscal year and they say, well, we didn't have attrition. And so that was the means by which we were going to save that money. And we didn't have attrition, so we couldn't save that money. And so, sorry, here's a budget amendment. You need to jack up our budget by that amount. So just for your awareness, that has happened.
I think just a couple comments. I think attrition is only one tool to achieve the reduction, and I think it's one tool amongst several that departments have to try to achieve these savings. And I think I don't think I said that some departments are not going to be able to achieve it. I said I think for some it's going to be, more of a challenge than possibly for some others. But I think overall, the way I look at departmental budgets, yes, separately, but I'm trying to achieve a balanced budget, knowing that overall, bottom line, I feel fairly confident that we will be able to achieve that 2% reduction and still stay within the authorized funding level for the entire county budget. Now, there might be some departments that struggle a little bit more than others, but I think overall, bottom line, I think we will stay within the authorized budget that the board finally approves. And, you know, my goal, maybe I'm not being realistic, but my goal is to not have a need for any budget amendments throughout the course of the year. Now, maybe that's pie in the sky, but my experience working in most of the counties I've been in, we have very, very few, if any, budget amendments throughout the course of the year. So that's my goal. You know, you'll probably hold me to that and remind me of these words later on, but that's what I'm going to strive for.
We will, Mr. Thompson. Don't worry about don't worry about that. No, all kidding aside, no, absolutely. And so let's hope for the best on this. Mr. Webster, I see you're either waving at me or trying to get my attention. Go ahead, Mr. Webster.
All the way to the end of the banquet table here. Hey, I just wanted to comment what our new administrator just said about he'd rather not see any budget amendments. We have talked about that so many times over the years. And I remember one time when Gary Jury put his foot down, he says, that's it, no more budget amendments, no more budget amendments. And 2 meetings later, he brought in a budget amendment.
Yeah.
But that truly is a goal, you know?
Yeah.
Figure out what you need to begin with, and unless there's some unforeseen circumstance, God knows, a hurricane or whatever, a flood or some darn thing. COVID, yes, for example. But other than that, yes, that truly is a goal. No more budget amendments. But you know,
But that's assuming that you have a realistic budget going into the year.
Correct.
Into the fiscal year. And so, you know, I hope to eventually get to there where department heads, you know, we bring them in one by one and they say, yes, it's going to be tight, but I think I can live within this budget. And so that's where I need to get to. I don't know if we're there quite yet, but eventually we'll get there.
And I think what has happened over the years is different departments just got used to coming in for budget amendments.
Well, if they see one, you know, it gets to be a habit, or it gets to be well, if they can do it, I can do it, and all this. But if no one's doing it, and if we kind of put our foot down, then I think you'll start to see maybe fewer.
Mr. Chapman.
Anyone else comments, questions before I continue on?
Can I just make one comment in regards to the budget?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this year, I know the amendments that we did, with the one exception of the amendment that failed last meeting, all those amendments were funded through either additional revenues or transfers within budgets and so on. And, you know, really the department heads did an outstanding job this year of saving money. I mean, as we talked before, when I presented that document that talked about covering the sheriff's budget amendment, there were a lot of departments that are not fully spending their budget. And if you remember last year's budget, we did take 2% out of their personnel budget for just to try and balance last year's budget. So even with that 2% reduction, they were able to stay within their dollars. So.
Absolutely. Any other questions, comments?
One more comment, please.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Webster.
Yeah, I just want to remind people there, you know, after our last meeting there, and then Mr. Chapman sent us some numbers there about spending in the sheriff's department. When you look at that, since 2012, there's only been 2 years where there was a total decrease. I mean, a decrease in the total amount, only 2 years. And so I've heard it said there before that every year you're cutting the sheriff's budget, but that's not true. Now, if these numbers are correct, starting in 2012, there was a 5.58% increase. 2013, a 1.76% increase. 2014, 2.43. And then 2015, I guess it was, 1.75 decrease. The next year, 12.9 increase. The next year, 1.73 increase. The next year was when we had 8.18 decrease. The 2 years since then, 1.33%, and then a 3.53%. And this year is a project for next year, 7.70. And so those are the real numbers there. I just want people to be aware of that. Since those years, only been 2 years of decrease.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Webster. Yeah, and just like reiterate, I think Mr. Thompson and Mr. Chapman took a real good look at it and kind of make sure that, you know, some of the budgets made sense and it wasn't just arbitrary on that aspect of it. So if there are any other comments, I'd like to do this. I'd like to have a motion to essentially on the 13 recommendations that which are found on page 4 and I believe 5 of the packet that Mr. Chapman sent out this afternoon or prior. There's the 13 items, which starts out with a reduce the general fund debt service of 40,000 going down the line all the way. And I believe Mr. Chapman, if I'm not mistaken, you included those budget amendments. Is that correct?
Yes, they're included in back of them along with some others that we have to discuss too. But yes, those with items 2 through 13 are part of the budget amendments that are included. Yes.
Okay. So I'd like to do this. I'd like to take these recommendations, put them on the floor, take a vote on it. So then we have direction for Mr. Chapman, Mr. Thompson, to actually next Tuesday when we go, you know, set up the meeting as a whole, county as a whole, to talk about the budget. We have the starting point where we're at. And then if there's any discussion, so we'll walk every county board member through this budget again. This is just the finance, but at least it gives us direction, sense, and idea. So we're not hearing a different thing at the combined or as a whole county board. Everybody is pitching in, throwing things here and there. Well, I didn't know this or anything of that direction. So I'd like to, see if I can get a motion and a second to take items 2 through 13 on the recommended, which are the budget amendments, to actually get those approved. So come next Tuesday, we're ready to go. So can I get a motion on that and a second? Mr. Hoffman? And can I get a second? Anyone?
I'll second it. Bert seconds.
All right, Mr. McDonald and Mr. Girl, thank you very much. So essentially, let's cover real quick so there is no misunderstanding of what we're talking. Mr. Chapman, can you talk about the budget amendments that you've included 2 through 13? Just real quickly go through it so everybody understands what we're voting on.
Yeah, let's see here. We're talking about the
recommendation.
Yeah, the recommendations, reducing the general fund debt service transfers by 40,000. That's just based on an increase in that particular fund. Item 3, the host fee transfer to the general fund of $1 million. Utilizing the county automation fund this year to fund certain IT expenses, which is allowed under the ordinance that we established at county automation fund a couple of years ago. Transferring of some Recorder's office personnel to the recorder's document fee fund. Reduction of personnel contingency in the general fund, 150,000. Reduction in the county highway and county bridge budget with the corresponding reduction in those levies and increasing the general fund levy, 302,000. That was discussed with Carlos and I believe the Public Works Committee, and it was okay. Reducing the county jail budget by $500,000 to reflect certain medical bills being paid by the commissary fund. The sheriff agreed to that. PSB budget, reducing the overall budget by 40,000 to reflect reductions in utility costs, repair costs. Item 10, reducing the building maintenance utility costs by 100,000, primarily in the natural gas area. Reducing the employer share of the health insurance due to our renegotiated prescription program costs and less usage because of the people not doing elective surgeries, etc. Item 12, increasing the revenues for the federal prisoners, 600,000. And item 13 is, it's not really, these are not really budget amendments, but they're really revenue enhancements, increasing certain revenues based on what the latest numbers that we have from the state. So that comes up to the 4.8 million.
Questions on these items? What we're, voting on the recommendations.
And also the VTEL extension too.
Correct. All right. Seeing none, I guess all those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Bill,
Mr. Schultz? Anyone else? All right, I just want to make sure because I can't see the screen and the board really, the room there. So the ayes have it. So Mr. Chapman, Mr. Thompson, you have your recommendations kind of going into the next meeting Tuesday, is what we've talked about. And so that's one of the topics. Is there any other questions regarding the budget? Go ahead, Mr. Schultz.
yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify that I've read through all the budget amendments, and the only budget amendment that I am not in favor of, just for the record, is budget amendment number 6. So that's the only one, which is the host fee balance, and it really falls in the category of the more important issue that I've already said is I'm not in favor of the original budget.
Right.
And so the budget amendments, with the exception of number 6, I do think are good changes, and I appreciate the work that went into them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Chapman, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, there were some other amendments that we did that because of changes that the department heads requested and that are included in this packet. If I can go through those real quick. 2021-001, that's a reduction of $14,800. That's a reduction in the probation service fee fund. Amendment number 2021-002, that's just moving cleaning expenses from the public safety building budget to the building maintenance budget. There was an incorrect allocation done for that. It's $115,000. Let's see here. Item 2021-003 reflects the reduction of $7,000 in the children's advocacy budget. 2021-004, that's for the county clerk. This is an increase in the election expense based on requirements that are required or necessary under the Senate Bill 1863, which relates to this November election. She will be getting a federal grant.
No, estoy en una junta, le hablo después.
Federal grants, 196,000, state grant is 67,000. Let's see here, sorry. Let's see. Budget amendment 2021-015. This is the additional federal grant for the circuit court, 30,655. 2016 and 2017 are the amendments for the mental health board we spoke about. 2018 is the amendment for the 2.2% reduction that I guess in essence we've approved. And then 2019 is the amendment moving expenditures over from the 1% fund over to the general fund. We don't want that 1% fund in a deficit situation, so we're moving just some expenses from the state's attorney's office, from the county jail and the sheriff's department over to the general fund. So that's all of it. So I guess if we could get a motion in a second on those amendments also.
Okay, so so there's 19, right, amendments? I just want to make sure I got them all.
Yes.
So, do we do
Some
that?
of those relate to the other items we already approved, but I guess if you want to approve all, that's fine.
All right, so can I get a motion to put on the table the budget amendments 1 through 19 for 2021? Mr. Hoffman and Mr.
Chairman?
Girl. Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you took number 6 out, I would vote for the rest of them.
All right. All right, let's take number 6 out for the time being. So 1 through 5 and then 7 through 19 budget amendments. Can I get a motion and a second? I believe Mr. Girl and Mr. Hoffman, thank you very much. Any discussion on the budget amendments? All right, see none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye or raise your hands. Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. So we'll go to budget amendment. Do you want, Mr. Schultz, is it okay if we vote on it or do we leave it open? Okay. All right, so let's put it back on the table. Budget amendment 6, which is, I believe it's the host fees, correct? Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Schultz.
That's correct.
Yep, of $1 million. So that's, can I get a motion and a second to put it on the table for voting? Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Girl, thank you very much. Discussion. All right, seeing none. Yeah. All right.
Just a one-time deal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All right. So, all right, any discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please sing by saying aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Mr. Schultz, anyone else? All right, Mr. Hoffman as well?
Yes.
All right, so we have Mr. Schultz and Mr. Hoffman, a no, and then the rest of them are yes. So thank you very much, that passes through. Mr. Chapman, I believe you have all the information, which kind of pertains to this, going into the next meeting, which would be county as a whole. On that, is there any other questions, budget-wise perspective for this meeting? Yes, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you to my fellow board members for being patient with all of my questions and comments. I genuinely appreciate it. I know I talk a lot, so thank you. I do believe that the other funds that I mentioned at the last meeting that are not in front of us, that the sheriff has, are significant and meaningful and important for the county board to actually get information about. So, you know, we got actual money in the commissary account, for example, during the current year. It'd be interesting to get that information, how much came in, how much of that was spent. what was it spent on to the extent that that could be even summarized? And then similarly, what's the anticipated revenue in terms of the new year? Just having something that's off the books like that is troubling to me. It's troubling to the auditors. They've raised it annually as an issue that should be coming through the accounting system and accountability system of the county board, and it's not. So I do believe at some point that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Yes, good comments, and I agree completely. Are there any other questions for the budget so we can move on? All right, seeing none, are there any other matters to come before this committee? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion to adjourn? Mr. Girl, Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Schultz, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Everybody have a good night.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Everyone have a good night.
Stay safe. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.